Welcome everyone. This is WCEE's virtual executive exchange, and I am Barbara Tyran, President of the Women's Council on Energy and the Environment. I am so very honored to introduce today Sheila Hollis, the Acting Executive Director of the United States Energy Association. Sheila will explore the highly relevant 2021 topic of resilience. For those unfamiliar with USEA, USEA convenes, educates, and provides nonpartisan fora for energy stakeholders. Internationally, USEA supports global energy development by expanding safe, affordable, and clean energy access, partnering with the United States government. Let's turn now to Sheila's extraordinary background, which includes so many firsts. First, Sheila is the first director of the Office of Enforcement at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The next first, she is the first energy lawyer on the super lawyers list, which for those who don't know is Washington, D.C.'s top 100 lawyers. She is also the first woman president of the Energy Bar Association and the only person to lead it and serve as chair of the ABA's section of Environment, Energy, and Resources, a leading forum for thousands of lawyers. Very importantly, for those of us in the WCEE community, Sheila is both a former Woman of the Year and WCEE President. Sheila will offer today her opening remarks on the role of resilience in her professional life and also in her many leadership roles in very worthy public interest institutions. As always, the Executive Exchange encourages your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Sheila, thank you so much for being here. And would you like to start us off with a few perspectives on the topic of resilience?
I would be pleased to, and thank you so much, Barbara, for inviting me, and thank you, Robin, for organizing this program and getting us on screen. Thank you so much, and I would also like to give thanks for Kim Grover, who's on. I know she may not be visible, but she's the backbone of USEA and has been my sidekick and very close friend for many years. But in these calamitous times in which Barry Worthington, the executive director for over 3 decades, just suddenly passed away. So we had to move quickly. And I was honored to be asked to step in as the acting executive director. As far as resilience goes, I think it runs in a family. My Irish grandmother, who I grew up in part with, she came direct from the old country of Northern Ireland. She was one of 8 children. My great-grandfather dropped dead in the field. He was illiterate. He couldn't even sign his name in Northern Ireland, probably from overwork. And so ultimately his widow, my great-grandmother, and the children, there were 7 girls and 1 boy, ended up coming to Philadelphia, which is where the Irish came in. They got here probably, I guess, in about 1914 or 15, but almost immediately there was TB and also a tremendous flu epidemic that wiped out a very significant part of the family. My grandmother was among those who survived that. They lived in central Philadelphia, which was a pretty tough town then. And anyway, they were domestics. All of them were domestics, but my grandmother found my grandfather, who was a few years younger. It was all going well, but he worked in the Baldwin locomotive factory in Philadelphia, and he got TB from working there. So she took him out on a stretcher all the way out to Colorado, where they had some connection, and moved to Colorado. Of all places, up to Estes Park, which you wouldn't imagine would be survivable at that high altitude for somebody with serious TB and severe lung problems. By that time, he had a quarter of a lung, but the first job he got when he was able to get up off the stretcher was as a piano mover up the mountains in Estes Park. So that tells you. And he was, let me say, he was 5'2", so that was a bit of a challenge. But nonetheless, they settled in Estes Park. Ultimately, moved down to Denver, and anyway, they lived their life in Denver. I spent a good part of my life with those wonderful grandparents. My mother was their only child. Their other baby passed away. And so my mother married my father, was stationed out in Denver in World War II. He was a bit of an intellectual in Cornell, but he enlisted at 33 years old, to everybody's surprise, because he just wanted to serve. And anyway, it was a long haul, but he did serve, and he was a medic, and because he had tremendous medical training, was headed to medical school and was working on his doctorate at the time too. Anyway, bottom line, they settled in Denver, but my father became ill, and anyway, he was up at the University of Michigan finishing his doctorate, became terribly ill, was unable to complete the doctorate, but he came back to Colorado, lived with us. But in the meantime, we moved a lot in and around. My mother got a job while my father was up at Michigan at Hanford, the Hanford lab in nuclear weapons design. Although she didn't even have a college degree, she had a natural capability in drafting and in visualizing things, which I did not inherit in any way whatsoever. So I moved with her. I didn't have any brothers and sisters. Moved with her up to Hanford, Washington when I was about 2. She was hired away in about 3 or 4 years by Los Alamos National Lab, and we lived in the closed city of Los Alamos, New Mexico for several years. It opened up about 3/4 of the way through my stay there. So I was prepared. I was ready to move at any time, and I just had to adapt to different circumstances, different states, different atmospheres, different children, different teachers. Ultimately, we ended up, she, in the middle of everything else, bought a motel out in the plains of eastern Colorado. And even when you're a little kid and you look down the road and the next sign down says "Last Chance Colorado," you know you're in big trouble. There is a place called Last Chance Colorado. But so she bought a motel in Strasburg, Colorado, and we were back and forth there all the time, back into Denver to see my grandparents. Back and forth, back and forth. But I went through about, I guess, 4 or 5 schools by then, and then settled in to finish grade school back in Denver, and they skipped a grade for me. So I just ended up graduating from high school relatively early and going off to the University of Colorado with my high school sweetheart, who I'm still married to. So that was the one part that didn't change too much. And my mother lived with us a significant part of her life. She came out here, and she went down to the Institute of Heraldry and did heraldic art for the last 10, 15 years of her career. So she was anything if you put her fingers on a pen or a pencil or a paintbrush, she could do it. And so that's her whole life, did that. My father died, like I said, when I was pretty young. And anyway, so it's been my husband, whose parents died right after we got married, which was early in life. We have one child. She's a psychiatrist, probably because of her parents. She figured she had no choice but to become a psychiatrist, I guess, just to keep track of us. And so anyway, I came out here. It was just on a fluke. The law firm I was going to go to work for in Denver, there was a great hit in Denver. And of course, I was among the first women graduating from law school in Colorado at that time. There were very few, really, when you got right to it. There might have been five or six in our class of maybe 100. That's probably about right. Anyway, one of the classes I took, maybe 2 or 3 classes I took, I was obsessed, despite the fact I was stuck out in Colorado with absolutely no water to speak of around me. I took law of the sea a lot. And I was obsessed by it, and have a very, very fine law professor who's still alive, and he wrote in part major portions of the law of the sea. And I speak to him often now. I think he's probably about 85, but really, really great. And he will probably be coming back to Washington to give a lecture back here when they lighten up a little bit, make it a little easier for somebody like him to travel at his age. So that all was the background. Why I was sitting in Colorado and I was obsessed with law of the sea, I cannot tell you. But I took a lot of it. And so when it was, again, a fluke, just sheer dumb luck, the interviewer came out from the Federal Power Commission. This is the first time they'd ever interviewed at the University of Denver. And there were very few jobs, to be blunt, and very few for women. When I went into interview with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which I always wanted really to be either CIA or FBI, the three men in the interview room laughed. They said, "Don't you know that you have to be 5'7" to be in the FBI?" And I was way below what they had in mind, I guess. But they had a good laugh over that. I went into another interview out there, and landmen are the entity, the people who go around and acquire land for drilling and all. So there are three guys sitting in there. I walked into the room and he said, "Hey, this one can't even read. Can't you see that sign out there? It says landmen." So you look back on it, you say, you could have been sued for that. But I mean, there's so many things that transpired. I interviewed with a very famous federal judge who's deceased now. I won't name names. He went on to be the chief judge of the 10th Circuit. But he interviewed me, and I really wanted to go into that position. But he wanted to know, did my husband permit me to work? Who was going to take care of the baby? And it's like, nobody would even have the guts to ask those questions. That would probably be illegal. But so, you had to be resilient, totally resilient. It was just sheer luck, I think, and the ability to talk a good game. And I'd taken the law of the sea, and I was obsessed by law of the sea. So on the flyer, as you went into the interview with the Federal Power Commission, there was a picture of a big LNG tanker. And so I just brought it in with me. I said, "This is fantastic. I've taken all this law of the sea," and the rest was history. I got the job offer, semi-informal, right on the spot. And I guess I had to take the bar. Maybe a week after I took the bar, I was in DC. I'd never been to DC. I didn't know anybody in DC except the former secretary of the lawyer that I had worked with out in Colorado. And she went to work with State Department and she was the typist on the Vietnam Peace Agreement and rode with Kissinger and all. Very, very, very brilliant woman. But I slept on her couch for the first couple of weeks. And within just sheer luck again, the minute I arrived in Washington, I didn't even have my bar results yet, so I was a law clerk. And so I was fussing around trying to get to know people and all that, and the Assistant General Counsel handed me an S1 registration statement. He says, "See if you can find something, these guys." And it was the United Gas Pipeline being spun off by Pennzoil Company. Was the single biggest corporate raid that had occurred in the United States to that date. So, of course, I didn't know anything about it. But I had taken a lot of SEC law. I loved securities law. So I took it. I was lying on the couch at my poor friend's place trying to read this S1 registration statement. I had taken a lot of securities law. And I had actually wanted to go to the SEC to work, but my husband at the time was a retail broker. And so they saw that as a conflict, and I couldn't take the job. So that's how I ended up, just sheer dumb luck at the FPC. I read the S1 registration statement. I read this one thing. They issued $100 million. Pennzoil issued $100 million out of the United Gas Pipeline, which was a big, big pipeline. They came up out of the Gulf Coast and served probably 70% of the East Coast and the South. And so this S1 registration statement said we issued a $100 million dividend up out of United's. United was very cash rich to Pennzoil Company. So I'm reading the 20 sections of the Natural Gas Act, and read. And it says in section 12, thou shalt not issue a dividend out of a capital account. And that was the nexus of the big investigation. That was the catapult that I needed. And that's how I made my name. Just almost, I mean, we're talking right off the bat. It couldn't have been more than, I think I had just gotten my bar results when I walked into that hearing room, which couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 months after I got to DC. And I was not supposed to be the lead lawyer. The lead lawyer was a very senior lawyer. And the case was so stressful, he backed out of it. It was just all the big law firms, all men, of course. They wore hats at that time. They still wore hats. And Brooks Brothers, top to bottom, A to Z, all the big players in all, not just the pipelines, but all of their customers, their big customers up and down the East Coast and all the state commissions, because it was a time of gas shortage. So if the gas was stripped away, they wouldn't be able to serve, and it'd be a scramble for service. It could cause all kinds of perturbation because this was curtailment time because of the gas shortage. And so it was all this huge bundle of stuff that hit like a bomb in the middle of Washington, really. I mean, it was the case. So I was in New York Times, Washington Post, Jack Anderson, Forbes, Fortune, and I hadn't even been, honest to God, I hadn't even been here a year. And I didn't know from nothing. I was just like Aaron Slick from Pumpkin Creek. But I just didn't know what I didn't know, so I just kept on doing it. So I wasn't crippled by fear, which could have been very easy to be. And then one thing led to another. I went to work with Dick Solomon, who had been the general counsel of the FPC pre-Nixon, and fabulous, unbelievable experience with him. I was his only associate during all these curtailment periods, so I got to go everywhere and represent everybody in all kinds of cases from one end of the country to the next. Unbelievable. And it was just sheer dumb luck and grit, just resilience. You just kept on rolling. And I didn't know any better, because that's what I'd learned from my mother. You just kept going. You couldn't just throw up your hands and say, gee, I can't do that. You just assume you have to be able to do it. And if you're too dumb to know you can't do it, it makes it a lot easier. I just assumed I could do it.
And you did.
I did, and a lot of it was luck. Right place, right time, and luck.
Fascinating. Fascinating story. Again,
nothing to be discounted. You cannot discount the factor of luck. And sometimes ignorance of what to be afraid of. If you obsess about everything to be afraid, what you should be afraid of, well, you can be cautious, you can be aware. But if you obsess over what there is to be afraid of, you can get stuck so that you're basically incapable of getting out of that box of fear.
Wise words, absolutely. So I want to encourage everybody, and first of all, thank you. We have over 30 participants, wonderful turnout. Thank you all for being here. And please do feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom. Just punch the Q&A button and feel free to type in a question for Sheila. I know she'd be thrilled to answer it, and we appreciate everyone's participation. I have a few more, so I'll keep going until we start to see the audience questions come in, Sheila. So you talked about arriving in Washington, D.C. That was 1974. Can you talk a little bit about Washington and what your initial impressions of the city were at that time?
Well, I was completely unaware there were no skyscrapers. That was a big shock. I'd never seen so much water in my life. You know, Colorado has water, but not water like we've got water, and all of the gorgeous monuments and all. But I was so, honest to God, I didn't get out and see much because I was thrown in the midst of this so quickly. But I called my my husband and my mother and our daughter, and well, she's still a little baby. I said, I think I'm going to be here a while. Can you just get out here like sooner rather than later? So they came out in a U-Haul it. And that's the way it was. It was a simpler time.
So we do have a question here that's come in. And so the questioner says, Sheila, your family is inspiring. I totally agree with that. Many of us in those early days were thrown in the water and told to swim. It was tough, but a good learning experience. That sounds similar to what you're describing. Would you say, Sheila?
Yeah, you go for it. If you let fear paralyze you and not believing in yourself enough to just go for it, you can't even get to second base.
Very thoughtful. Thank you very much. Thanks to Miriam for that question. So my next question is, what was the energy landscape like professionally when you came? Can you describe that?
Well, as far as women goes, in that first Federal Power Commission proceeding before Chief Judge Swerdling, who was the absolutely incredible Chief Judge, it was all men other than the court reporter. Maybe a couple paralegals in the back, but that was about it. It was, it was the 70s, so I was dressing like the 70s. So I guess I must have been pretty colorful, as I recall. I was always a lover of I was always a clothes lover. I've lost quite that enthusiasm now, but I love clothes, so I didn't mince, and I wore nifty outfits, and I just walked in with, well, because the case was so big, I had all of the major office heads, accounting, Bureau of Natural Gas, they called it at the time. So I had 5 or 6 office heads that were in that hearing with me. So I know I always had backup because it was such a critical case, and it was on the front pages because it somehow involved Bibi Rebozo and Nixon, who was close to the Litke brothers. And it was all part of this whole package. And my first trip to Houston was part of the investigation. So this is almost excruciating to recall. So as part of the investigation, I had to go down and meet with Mr. Litke, who was very gracious. God, I must look like a drop from Mars, to go through his personal files in his office, because I had the investigatory order. And they owned a heavily regulated entity, which was United Gas Pipeline. So I had to go behind his desk. I mean, there were no computers. Just think of a world where there are no computers and you're trying to conduct an investigation. There's plain old papers. So it must have been like an invasion of the Martians, because, but I got to say, they always treated me very, very properly. I mean, as far as the just general manners and all, there was never, at that phase, it was still like having a Martian drop in that world. But the people were so, I think they didn't know quite what to do, so at least they wanted to be gentlemanly. And so there's a lot of snipping and sniping in the hearing room by the men around the table, representing all the big players who were on the Pennzoil side of things versus those that were on the consumers. I would say the consumer side, the big local distribution companies and the state commissions, and the consumer groups on the other side. So I have to say that I guess I didn't hear what was being said behind my back, but in any event, I knew I had a job to do and I just had to do it.
Good for you. Well, that leads, actually, that's a beautiful segue to the follow-up comment from Miriam, who says, you make your own luck by doing a good job. So I think that's intended to be a compliment to you, Sheila. And we're going to turn now to a question from Johanna at USEA, whom we all know. And she says she'd like to know, what can you tell us about the early days of WCEE?
Well, it started out, and it was very small and a little shaky. I mean, it was just so small, and there were so few people involved in it. And then, I won't say so few people who were aware of it and became involved, and ultimately became involved. But there are wonderful women, Mary Glass, some really wonderful people. Martha Madden, she was around then, wonderful person. May she rest in peace, wonderful person. But just people that wanted to make it happen, and they saw a need because they were women who were in environment and energy. So, and they didn't really feel like they had a home. So this was sort of not every in the ABA you would have sort of have a home in the ABA sections and all, but they didn't really have a home, and they wanted to make a go of this. And so that's what happened. We just put our heads together and we started doing programs, and we just started getting out and emailing people. We didn't have the same access to the more sophisticated ways like we are Zoom and all of the other PR ways that we did, but we got things going. And in the energy bar, I guess that was 1990, must have been about that anyway. And in the energy bar, it turns out there are quite a few lawyers that were interested in it too, so that we were able to drum up membership through the energy bar too. So anyway, lots of different things, and word of mouth. When we'd have the programs, we had word of mouth spread that these are the types of things that are worth doing, and we had in-person things, and it all kind of took off. And then we invented the Woman of the Year and so on, and it got more and more PR. And then also because of the by then we were rolling with respect to emails and more outreach, electronic outreach that really propelled it much further, faster. And then we had the Woman of the Year event, which was wonderful, and that really kicked things off, and gave everybody a chance to get together and share in the achievements of other women. I think it was an idea looking for a home, and we presented the home.
And we're grateful that you did. Thank you. The home is continuing. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's the 40th anniversary of WCEE this year.
Is it really? You. Oh my God.
Thank you, Ms. Sheila. Thank you
for
all that support. So we have a follow-up question. We have a follow-up question from Miriam, who says, regarding women in energy leadership positions, is it better now that we have greater numbers of women in energy?
Oh yeah, I think it's not easy, but it's really I think it's ascended the ladder rather drastically compared to where it was. And just thinking back, I think there were a lot of women who found their way into energy via being lawyers in it, and then there were some accountants, but it was very few and far between. And I know Steve Mitnick is doing a lot of work on this. Few and far between women who were in executive positions, and that finally started to kick in and evolve in the late 80s, early 90s. But it was slow going there for a while. But it's really accelerated now.
Good, thank you. So another question from me. You've been a leader in energy in all three sectors: the public sector, as you described, the private sector, and now the not-for-profit sector. Can you talk about what it's been like to be in all three sectors, what the similarities have been and what the differences have been?
Well, to be in government in a in any position, obviously care and compliance with all the regulations of being a government employee, and I think now at least there's better HR in place to keep the eye out for discrimination against women or minorities, and women and other people that didn't fit the 1950 style look of nice white men in nice suits wearing hats and all that. I mean, it evolved, and I think there's been a tremendous acceleration of more integration, more minorities and women, and LGBTQ. And I think it's made a lot of progress, but it sure has many miles to go, but we're getting there. And I think that certainly the utilities are making this a major press. I think the federal government is as well, state governments too. So I think progress is being made, but I would be I would only be kidding myself if I said it was easy. It's still, I think it's still a challenge.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, one more time, please, for those of you who are attending, do feel free to put your questions into either the Q&A button, or we're using the chat function as well, and all questions are welcome. We'd love to hear from you, so please feel free to participate through those functions. Shifting along now, I'm thinking, Sheila, that there must be an interesting story about how you became the first woman president of the EBA. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it was from going to the energy bar. They used to call them the ex-parte ball, you know, where everybody got together in a big ballroom at the Mayflower once a year and listened to marvelous speeches. And the commissioners generally imbibed and had a heck of a lot to say. And so I think that working with Dick Solomon, Richard A. Solomon, the former general counsel, who was went on to be president of the Energy Bar, working with him and getting to know, also the more into practice I got, I saw that I knew of a lot of the men who were active in the Energy Bar, Federal Energy Bar Association. It was called the FERC Bar, FPC Bar Association, I think, for a while, but they went through several iterations before it just boiled down to the Energy Bar. And just going to the events, going to the meetings, talking to people, and going to lunch. In fact, I should mention, when I came to Washington, I knew, as I said, other than my former secretary sleeping on her couch, my mother always said to read Who's Who in America. And so I went to the old FPC library and I took down Who's Who in America, and I decided I was going to try and meet people who were big in energy. And so I made a list. And so I just called them. I just decided I was going to learn more about it, because I couldn't, otherwise I'd just be, under a rock and not know anything. So I say it was about a 50% hit that people agreed to go to lunch, or at least have a cup of coffee. And that's how I just forced myself to do it. I mean, it sounds really primitive, but you didn't have computer access then. 1974, it was maybe in the national labs, but computer access was just really starting. So there was one computer in the whole Federal Power Commission. You had to go to the library to use it. I mean, we're talking about a different planet. And so that seems like a simple thing. My mother always said, read Who's Who in America and see if you can figure out anybody who, what they're doing, and see if you can reach out to them. Okay, might as well. I'll give it a shot. And I did, and it worked.
That's a fantastic endorsement of the power of networking in whatever venue you have.
Absolutely. But then, how did I go from just fall off the back of the turnip truck from Colorado? Well, it was from being in the hearing. And then I got to know Dick Solomon. Dick Solomon hired me from that. Of course, his son is the solicitor at the FERC now, Richard A. Solomon's son. So the history lives on, and brilliant solicitor, brilliant young solicitor. Well, I guess he's not so young now. And then I got to know Dick Solomon's wife, who wrote the first book on electronic banking. She was his senior professor at George Washington Law School, and it was great. Because I didn't have, all I had was my mother, my husband, and my daughter, and I was a social animal, and I just made a point of getting out and meeting people the old-fashioned way, pre-computer.
And it worked. It worked very well.
It worked. You'd be surprised. You would be surprised the opportunities that exist in life if you only just ask.
Good for you. That's a fantastic story. I love that. So I'm going to follow up on Johanna's comments about the history of WCEE. And so, as we noted, and by the way, congratulations on being a Woman of the Year. I think everybody would love to hear about the award ceremony that night and how that felt to be honored as WCEE's Woman of the Year, and also, of course, as a WCEE president.
Yeah, well, I brought my family, as I recall, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was elegant. It was glamorous. It was exciting. It was just fantastic. And what can you say? It was beautiful. And it meant so much. And just having my family there to see it and feel it and touch it and know it, it was amazing. When you have a tiny little family, you drag them to everything that they're able to go to. And I think it just, the being with friends, just being with friends, and it was was smaller. It was very convivial. Everybody knew everybody, and it just, all I could do is say, I think it certainly was a high point of my life.
Great. That's nice to hear. And I believe you still have your award. Isn't that correct?
I do. I went down, I fondled it. I was down at my office over the weekend and went in, and, I was going to drag it along, but I thought, oh God, I'll break it or something. Taking a big glass. It was pretty good size. So I didn't want to drag it in and drag it around and bring it home and hold it up and end up breaking it. But it's a great award. It's a fun award and a great award.
Great. Well, congratulations again on that. I'm going to shift now to a little bit more about the United States Energy Association, where you're currently the acting executive director. And can you talk about how resilience has assisted you in your leadership of that organization since you became acting executive director?
Well, we've had incredible pressure. Barry passed away out of the clear blue. Just spoke to him on a Friday night, talking about the meeting on the Monday morning. I got a call Saturday morning and he'd passed away. At the beach, he was at the beach with his family. I couldn't believe it. He was vibrant. Had a great talk with him. We were talking about the A, B's, and C's. I was chair of the board then, and just wonderful talk. And I had the annual report, and everything was hunky dory. And I got the call. I just couldn't believe it. It just happened. And so, of course, it was extremely chaotic. And so I think the meeting was postponed for a week of the board and all. But I spoke to various members of the board and all, because I know this is depressing, but it's the fact. The funeral, there were a number of people who were on the board who went to Barry's funeral and interment out in Maryland, and it was just the whole thing was like, I couldn't imagine it was actually happening, truthfully. And so then something had to be done. There's a number of outstanding staff. I can't say enough great things about the staff, right straight on down. Brian Kearns, Kim Grover, all the senior leaders, my God, just beautiful, fantastic people that I talk to all the time. And just, it was either sink or swim. I don't know how else to say it. You can't just let something like that drift. We have enormous obligations with USAID and DOE. We have members. We have meetings that have to happen. It was just there, and there was no other magic person to just kind of step in. And so I ended up stepping in and really in a heartbeat, and that's how it came to pass. But it was extraordinary. I've been through a lot, but I've never been through anything like that. And just boom, when somebody just dies so suddenly with no warning whatsoever, under normal happy times, but it happened. So what are you going to do? You can't just do nothing. So I thank God for the board that stepped in. Vicki Bailey was just unbelievable. And of course, Vicki and I had worked together on a variety of stuff over many years in USEA, and we're just and Tom Kuhn and the whole board just stepped up. They just stepped up, and they were incredibly supportive and helpful. And so within a couple of weeks, we kind of had to get our hands on the steering wheel and get back to business. We have all kinds of obligations. We had meetings. We had everything coming up. of course, it was in the middle of COVID, so it made it even more insane, the entire situation. And so there was no, oh, let's have a big meeting and everybody come in, we all get together and meet in person and decide what to do. No, it was all online stuff. It was all on a screen, the entire thing. And so we had to step it up, because there's contracts, there's obligations, there's big offices down there. Brian Kearns is a fantastic, the treasurer, the chief financial officer is just, he was steady as a rock, but I think everybody was stunned by it. And we had to keep moving. We have people that we have obligations to USAID, to DOE. We had meetings coming up. We had reports to get out. You can't just let it go. there was no option except to move fast and keep everything going.
Which is exactly what happened. So
yeah, I look back on it, even I can't believe that we went on. We had meetings. We had programs. We just did it. And Vicki and the board, unbelievable, the fantastic people on the staff. Kim Grover, God bless her. Dominic Levings jumped in, both feet, and just incredible ability to rise to the occasion and move. Just astonishing. All of the people on the staff. Nobody hesitated. Nobody quit. Nobody hid at home. They just stepped up and did their job, and it was hard when you worked with a person who'd been there for over 30 years, and you did things were done a certain way, even with COVID and all that. Just the whole routine. So we started moving fast we had town meetings for the staff. We got everybody together to say what was on their mind, for me to meet them all. I'd met them all, obviously, over the many years and all these meetings and all, but to really go deep and talk. And we did. And the three directors, my God, they were fantastic. Will Poland, Marjorie Jean-Pierre, Andrew Palmatier, my God, they just stepped right up and moved forward with their teams. If you look at the breadth of what USEA does, things have to happen, even though we were doing it all virtually, all over the world, that we're obligated to keep doing. So you can't just wander off and think, you can't just wander off and be sad. I mean, you just had to jump in and keep rolling. So then we instituted the newsletters. We started the weekly newsletters, and then we had the monthly newsletters, and we started to have the town meetings, which I think were town hall and town meetings. And we're doing another one pretty soon. But I think that the communications had to be ramped up, I mean, all the way in a very short period of time. Because Barry was USEA, USEA was Barry, for good reason. But we had this whole organization of people who were doing major things and at a mission that mattered. So we had to keep doing it. So that's what we did.
It's a tribute to all of you. And speaking of the wonderful people at USEA, which I completely support and agree with, we do have a question from Will Poland in the Q&A, and he says to you, Sheila, such an inspirational story. Thank you for sharing it. Can you talk about how you overcame a setback in your career, and upon reflection, what it taught you?
I had several setbacks in my career. The first was when I was graduating from law school, and the law firm I was supposed to go to work for folded. They had a big fight and folded right out from under me. And that way, the whole thing had been built around it. I'd clerked there, I'd worked there, it was all set. I knew the people very, very well. There was a big brouhaha among the lawyers in the firm. It was a small firm, a wonderful firm, very financially oriented. It was all real estate, which I loved, and trial work, and a very wonderful elite firm. And they just, it was all guys, and they had a fight, and that was it, and they split up. And so there was the firm as I had known it didn't exist anymore. so I had to hustle. That happened right away. And so then I had to hustle to find a position, because I all the way through I'd clerked with them back and forth and up and down and written briefs and done research and served eviction notices in Denver. You know, they're a real estate firm with huge apartments and condos and all that. And so I did all that, and suddenly, poof, it was gone. Poof, over the matter of a week. So that's when I started to hustle and do other things. And that's mercifully, I'd taken this wonderful, wonderful international law course. I had enough to talk about. And I interviewed, and I tell you, the interviewing was no fun at all. There were very few women. And it was very, very rough treatment, very, very rough treatment. And besides, Denver was down on the jobs because, well, for people graduating locally, so many people had moved out of the East to come to the West. The Yale graduates, the Harvard graduates, and all, and you know, they were pretty attractive. Although I got this amazing interview with this fantastic, what I thought was a fantastic judge, and he wanted to know who was going to take care of the baby and did my husband approve of my working. I just was so blown away that I was the only woman. I think it was the first woman he'd ever interviewed, and a very fine judge. But it just times were changing, but they hadn't changed. They were kind of, you could feel it around the edges that things were starting to change, but they hadn't really hit. And so I did an excruciatingly long series of interviews for, it's in the Library of Congress and for the ABA Trailblazers on this whole history. And there are about 100 women that are in this Trailblazers list, approximately 100, that women who changed history. And you know, I'm low on the totem pole in that, but it was people who were coming into the law at approximately that time, maybe even earlier, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She would be like #1 on the hit parade here. And you know, people of that stature, but they, you know, it was just happening the first few years leading up, and then it was really starting to move when I graduated. But it was rough. Well, I tell you, that talk about resilience, that was pretty scary. And I came out not knowing if I'd pass the bar. I could have been headed right back if I did not make it through the bar, or you know, demoted. Wouldn't have been good not to pass the bar, but I passed the bar, and so that was it. Boom, 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 and I got the great Pennzoil case out of the clear blue sky through dint of fate, complete dint of fate. No rhyme or reason to it, except I looked like such a hungry animal to do stuff. I was extremely eager and willing to take on anything, because I was too ignorant to know that I should be scared. It's great. It's great to know that you don't know enough to be scared. You just jump in.
Good for you. Good for you. It's a great story. WCEE Vice President Hannah Viscara wants to know, what do you see as a couple of the top challenges for the energy sector today?
Oh, I think there's two. There's two major, setting aside women's issues and all that. I think the two gut issues are cybersecurity. And I've done a lot of worrying and thinking and working in that area for a long time. And then emissions and CO2 and climate change. I think those are the two core issues that the energy business, energy and environment business has got to focus on and zone in on completely. I think that'll keep us busy for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. Very intractable problems, not easy solutions, and not fast ones either.
I have to tell you, the cybersecurity, I'd say that in the immediate term scares me more than anything. Not just because of this thing with the pipeline now. I mean, that's bad enough, but I represented the grid in the blackout of 2003, 2004. And, you know, theoretically, it was not a cyber incident, but we'll never really know, will we? I mean, honest to God, we'll never really truly know what happened. And because it was the kind of, I won't say the beginnings, but in the early phases of grid operations and the way they operate now, in a complete reliance on cyber.
Very interesting. Thank you. So Hannah has also a follow-up to that, which is she's asking, as a senior leader in the energy sector, do you have any specific suggestions for early and mid-career professionals about how to focus their careers on the challenges of tomorrow?
I'd say the more you talk to people who will talk to you, the better. And I mean talk. It may be video, but I mean talk. Once the clouds part on this, I think getting out and about in person is going to be incredible, and I think that's where you're going to pick up a lot of information, which nobody wants in cyber world to live on forever. It may be possible to have mano-a-mano conversations where it isn't recorded for somebody to dig up 20 years from now. Yeah, I think that's really going to be a key part of it to re-enter the world as we knew it.
Thank you. So you talked a lot about the resilience, not only of yourself, of course, but the whole USEA team, during the past year. Is there a single or more than one accomplishment that you'd like to talk about during this past year at USEA?
I think our programs have been superb, and we never missed a beat. We didn't cancel, we didn't drop the ball, we didn't wimp out, we didn't hide behind the bushes. We just kept right on going, albeit not in person, but we did it all over the world. And we've spoken, we've interacted, we've had more Zoom calls and WebExes and everything that I could possibly count. Our people have gotten out, they've spoken in the sense of, obviously cyber speeches, but that's okay. So I think we have not lost people as members, and we haven't lost audience. In fact, we had more people attending our meetings because of the availability of Zoom and similar than they would have if they were put in the ballroom of the press club, which I adore, or up in the rotunda of the Reagan building. So, you play the hand you're dealt. We were dealt an insane hand in 2020. There's no way around it on so many fronts, the loss of Barry being key and at the top of the list. But as far as just changing the way you have done things, we did it. We pivoted. And we haven't lost people. We've gained people, and we've gained more audience because we're doing it in a different way.
Great. And we have a comment that's come, actually really more than a comment, it's a compliment to you, Sheila, from Jane Brady. She says, "You are such an inspiration for all of us. Thank you for your leadership and sharing your incredible career and life experience. We have so much to learn from you." So, and a similar comment also came in from Robin Robinson. And thank you, Robin, for all that you do for WCEE and to make today possible. And I'm going to close with one question for you, Sheila. So it's been an incredible year for USEA and for you and for all of us, for that matter, in various respects. Can you talk a little bit about your future vision for USEA going forward?
Yes, I think because we have been able to continuously reach out to so many people, I think we're going to do a lot more on the screen, no matter what. And I think we're going to enhance and expand that. I also see USEA reaching out beyond to other organizations. I'm thinking here, organizations analogous to us around the world. I also see us as focusing more on the climate change issue and integrating more discussions on climate change and how it impacts energy and how energy impacts climate change. It's a two-way street in this. Also, I think cybersecurity, our focus on cybersecurity is we did 15 different programs on it with some of the top people in the world. If you go to the USEA website, you'll see it's unbelievable how much we've done on cybersecurity. It's there like a set of Encyclopedia Britannica on the shelf if you want to see it worldwide. I also like the fact that we're talking to people all over the world on a continuous basis, and we don't have to get on a plane. The time will come soon when we'll be on a plane, and our staff is so eager to get back in country and do their work in country. And with USAID, we have new USAID administrator, we have a new Secretary of Energy. We have new members of Congress, and we're so looking forward to getting them on an ongoing basis more and more involved. I mean, they have been always so good in the past, and they've been able to show up in person. And we've been very, very fortunate with the speakers we've gotten and all, but we're going to keep at that, and we're going to involve them and have them realize the new members of Congress, the new appointees, the new members of government, that we are at state, federal, local, it doesn't matter what we're doing. And we want to be able, utilities and other players in the energy arena, we want to be able to evolve with them and to pick up on their needs so that we can run with it and use USEA as a platform to communicate further and to a more diverse audience even. I mean, diverse in the loosest possible term. And I also think that USEA has, if you look at our meeting last week, you'll see it was the most diverse set of speakers we've ever had. That is something that we are very, very dedicated to, we're committed to, and we're going to make it happen with respect to all of our major programs to make it work. I think it's absolutely critical. We're working all over the world, including extensively in Africa, and getting emails from great people on our staff who are just so eager to get back in country and work in those countries throughout Africa and throughout the world. So that's coming. We know it's coming. And so we're going to be reopening a lot of doors and opening new doors at the same time.
That's a wonderful vision. It sounds like a very exciting future for you and for USEA. Yeah. And I want to thank you, Sheila Hollis, for your dedicated support of WCEE over so many years and for speaking with us today. Thank you to everyone for joining today's program and for providing questions and for all the background support that went into making this event possible. We value our relationship with each and every one of you. And we hope that if you're interested in learning more about WCEE or getting more involved, that you'll come to our meet and greet. It will be a virtual event, but everyone is welcome on May 20th at 2 o'clock. And again, thank you so much, Sheila Hollis, for being our virtual executive today. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thanks, Barbara. It's great fun. And thank you, Robin, for your wonderful support and friendship over all these years.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.